Hello. This is Christina Barton. You're watching Black Tea News. Hello, welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we are going to be talking about Kamala Harris brazenly being dishonest about the curriculum in Florida regarding their African American history studies. And this kind of exploded over the weekend. And she's, I don't know, saw a tweet and had to rush out there and give a big speech. And I think this is so funny coming from her because she's one of the most insincere politicians in current day and age. She was my least favorite contender on the Democrat side. And she's sitting there in the VP office, and everybody really can't stand her. She is very high on favorables, and she doesn't really serve the presidency well as far as like Biden and stuff. And rumors are they don't care for each other. But when you accuse someone of being against you busing into school and accuse them of being a segregationist, those feelings tend to be I don't know, they fester, I guess. But she's just overall just not good at her job. So when they can point her in a direction where she can harp on like a little attack dog, I guess that she'll do that. So Roe v. Wade, anniversary, she was out there, saying stuff 'cause she's a woman, and she's out there trying to, use her I'm a black person to be like this is disgusting, etc. When she's just there's one part that they're focusing on to really skew it as if they're creating some kind of big revisionist history. And it's just not the case from what the curriculum is set up. But I do think it's important to address and talk about. And DeSantis addressed it when when he was asked about it when she came into town, or basically was like, no one cares about this stuff, and we're not having it, and blah blah blah, woke, blah blah blah. But I don't think that's the right approach. And I think if that's what the DeSantis team has in mind for winning elections, especially a presidential election, that's not going to fly because I don't know. There's African Americans. I'm sure there's a lot of African Americans that love, Black Americans who love Ron DeSantis. I really like Ron DeSantis myself. But even I've heard some Black Republicans in Florida that are raising their eyebrows at some things. So their messaging isn't as strong as maybe they hope that it is, or this idea that everyone's just ignoring the woke stuff because time and time and time again these people lie. I don't think it's a slam dunk if that's what their thinking is, and they really need to address this stuff. But also I wanted to talk about Snow White, and I know we talked about it last week in the dwarfs thing, but there's an interview circulating around with the actress saying, with Gal Gadot, and the actress who's playing Snow White, saying that the prince doesn't save her and this is a modern version. And and I don't like this route of Disney going like it's so old fashioned for a man to save the day. And I don't understand this like visceral dislike of men. And I think there's just so much that they don't understand and so much that they don't get about men and women relations, and they're really ruining their content. And I've talked about how they resented fans, they resent kind of where they've come from. And it's not that hard to make something new. The live action stuff, you might as well think of it as something new because they really aren't honoring their intellectual property. But I don't understand the mockery and the resentment towards these things when so many people love them growing up, but they just don't like these people who are involved. So anyway, those are big subjects to tackle, and it's going to take us a while to get through it. So those are the main two things we'll be talking about today. But before we jump into it, I want to encourage you guys, go blackteens.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. By the way, I hope you had a good weekend. It's Monday, so I hope you guys had a fun weekend. Actually, I had a jam-packed weekend actually. On well, Friday, after I signed off, I went to church. Church was good. And on Saturday, I went to a meet and greet. K-Love is a Christian radio station. I listen to it all the time. And so one of the artists who's on K-Love a lot is Danny Goki. So they're having this Meet Every Fan tour. And so I watched American Idol back in the day, and I did see the season with Danny Goki when he was on it. And he's got some good songs. And I follow him, some stuff on social media, and he seems like pretty solid in his values and beliefs, and very bold, very loving, but very bold. So I wanted to meet him, and I've for a while, just throwing this out to the internet, see what comes of it. I've wanted to write him a song for a while. Some of you guys know that I sing, and maybe less of you know that I songwrite, but I do both. I haven't put out anything in a long time personally for myself, but I do write music, and hopefully, a lot of the songs I have will be able to find a home one day, or maybe I'll bust out another album or something. I don't know, but gosh, me and my siblings put out an article about 20 years ago. Long time ago. I was just a wee lass when we did it, like literally in middle school. Yeah. Going into high school, but yeah, middle school, recording this stuff. So if you find our album, it's The Bar's Destiny. It sound quite young on the soundtrack, because I'm like 12, 13. My photo, which I look very grown up in my photo, but I'm really like 14. But so anyway, I went there early morning so I could, take a photo and meet him and stuff. So I had a flash drive of my information and stuff on it. I did hand it off to him. I told him, just really quickly, like, I'd love to write for you, and and here's my information, and there's a song, that I wrote it, a long time ago, that that I love for you to be able to sing, and I think you did such a good job. So anyway, I gave him the information. He's like, "Oh, is everything on here?" I said, "Yes." So we'll see what comes of it. My sister's like, "Oh, you out here networking? You got to try." For those of you who don't know me, it's pretty outside my comfort zone, but I put myself out there. Maybe nothing happens. Maybe everything happens. We'll see. And so then I had to go back to my hometown, because I had to sing at an event. And then I picked up my sister. We both went to that event, and then we left just a little bit early so we could go back out to where the concert was. And the concert was really nice. He sang really good. I thought the energy of the crowd was a bit weak, though. It was a little too lax for my taste. But he did a great job, and he again, really, really strong with his conviction. So had a really good Saturday. Busy, drove a lot, and afterwards I came back home, and we're out toward my house, and we picked up another sister and we went out to dinner. So very, very long Saturday. And then on Sunday we had church, and church was good. So and then I had a meeting, a big meeting with some things that I'll would like to announce later but can't now. So good weekend. So anyway, I hope you guys had a weekend. I hope you guys cared, now that I've rambled about what I did this weekend, but I had a lot of fun. So anyway, go to blackteennews.com, check out different content on my website, articles, videos, etc. Check out different merch at the store. Check out my different books that I have available for purchase, like, of course, God is Blatantly Against Abortion, which we'll see where our time is at the end, because I got some things I would like to say about that particular topic, but I won't delay. Check out other merch that we got there as well on the website, like Pro-Choice Men or sus. And make sure you're dropping your email. If you're watching on Facebook, you guys can do stars. If you're watching on YouTube, you guys can do super chats. And you can go to the website and give directly there at the website. Cost stream, run my website, everything. So if you can support, God bless you, very much appreciate it. So I don't have a funny, so our intro is long enough, so let's just jump into it. So Florida is in the news again, and this kind of is reminiscent to me of the Don't Say Gay bill There's like something they view as controversial, it blows up on social media world, and then the news picks it up and it becomes this gigantic narrative. So the narrative is that Florida, and this is being spearheaded by Kamala Harris, the Vice President of the United States, that Florida is teaching like revisionist history regarding, you know, the Civil War and slavery and other stuff like that. That it was a good like it was a good thing, I guess, for people to be enslaved because slaves picked up different skills. Now, that sounds pretty jarring. Which, by the way, they have a lot of stuff in the curriculum that's obviously not the point of the entire studies. Um, but if is it just not people just don't think it's true that people learn particular things and were able to when they got out of slavery they applied them in the real world in some kind of fashion. I'll use an example, um like a biblical one at least. Um what about Joseph, um who was enslaved? His brother sold him into slavery, and so he was in Potiphar's house, and he was very skillful and wise. So he got kept getting elevated into different authorities within the house. Now he and his wife, not Joseph, but Potiphar, wanted a piece of that action. So she ended up saying like, "Hey, lay with me." And he's like, "Are you crazy?" And she's like, "You better do it because I'm just gonna say you did it." And so he ran out of his coat. He just flee from temptation, fellas. And then she lied on him, and then he was thrown in prison, and was in there for a minute, and ended up, interpreting a dream of some people who worked for Pharaoh, and ended up getting back to Pharaoh. And so Pharaoh, at a time when Pharaoh eventually needed his dream interpreted, they're like, "Oh, there's this guy," and so he got him out, and then he appointed him to be over Egypt, managing a big project for the years of famine and years of plenty and stuff. And so his arc in the Bible is something a lot of people preach about, a lot of people love and go to and stuff. Um he got a really he just his brothers hated him because he had a dream that everyone would be like bowing like to him, and they're like, "Oh, you just think you're this, you think you're better than us." And he was the favored child, and so they just had all this animosity toward him, and they hated him. And then they um were, you sold him into slavery, and they told their dad that he was killed. So his dad had all this grief and stuff for his son being dead and stuff. So it's a really interesting story if you haven't read the Bible. um but every sort of setback, he still applied it in some kind of way to get you can see how everything worked together for his good in that particular circumstance. So it's a really ugly story as far as the things that happened to him. But everything did lead to him eventually um leading over Egypt. And in his time, when his family would have died in famine and stuff, he was appointed a position of power where he could actually turn around and save the people who screwed him over in the first place. He didn't take it well at first when he saw him. It's a really interesting story. If you haven't read in the Bible, I recommend that you go do that. So I'm not saying that slavery works together all for the good. I'm saying that people in bad circumstances are resilient and they learn to make the best of things. Um, this is not a good thing that happened to him in that biblical sense, to my ancestors. It's not a good thing what Kamala Harris's ancestors did. Uh, to people as far as enslaving them. These aren't good things that happened. Um, but to be angry because people are saying, "Hey, this bad thing happened to them," And some of these people, when once they were free, they did have certain skills that they could use in the era of reconstruction to kind of try to put their lives back together and to build something for themselves, even though in spite of these terrible things that happened to them and their family before them, etc. It's not teaching that slavery is a good thing. And there's a lot of curriculum. National Review actually like has a list of every time it's like mentioned, and has a pretty good article about how brazenly it's Kamala Harris is brazenly lying about Florida's slavery curriculum. That's what it is. Their article, and they break it down. Um, it is very reaching what she's trying to do, and people are so focused on race that they get so hyper emotional when it's brought up in any kind of way. On a side note, I just got to say this: it's wild to me how angry people get about um this stuff, this visceral anger and passion about things that happened in the past. And I'm out here like, you guys believe in killing babies. I'm just like, there's plenty of evil for you guys to own up to today that you don't have to. We can be, you know, ticked off about what happened in the past and upset that it happened and learn from it and etc. But I'm just like, you have plenty of sins today. How dare you think you're so high and mighty? Like, I'm just baffled. So talk about revisionist history, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself. Kamala Harris, when she was talking about Roe v. Wade, she was, talking about our rights, ensuring our rights, our liberties, and she skipped a very important one. She said, "Liberty in the pursuit of happiness." What did she miss, guys? And it was on purpose. It had to be on purpose because it flows from your tongue: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So she can even remind people of this obvious thing, that life is a God-given right. Or if you don't want to say God-given because you're an atheist or something and you're triggered, just natural right. That it's a natural right that we inherently have just by existence. That you have a right to not be killed. And she couldn't even say that because she's so gung-ho on supporting abortion. It's wild to me. It's wild to me. Okay. Um that people are they can't smell their own poop, okay? It just bothers me so much. It bothers me so much. So frustrated about it. But anyway, let's look a little bit about Kamala Harris chit-chatting about this.
And while they do this, check it out. They push forward revisionist history. Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. They insult us in an attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it.
So again, it's not that you're benefiting from slavery. You acquire different skills that benefit you, right? Have you ever been in like a relationship that maybe you shouldn't have been in, and you're like, well, I learned this from it. Like maybe it was the wrong choice, you're in the wrong situation, bad spot, whatever, but at least you took a positive thing from it. Like you learned to stand up for yourself, maybe, or whatever, right? But we wouldn't say that. Well, some people like, well, it was worth it. I'm like, or you could have learned about yourself and for some kind of positive means. Didn't have to get with the wrong dude, but people will take what they can out of whatever circumstance. So if you learn to be a blacksmith, and then you went out and had a career or whatever, or you were in the kitchen cooking stuff, and then you opened up a little shop or got a job and you know cooking somewhere else, or being a seamstress, or a ton of other different things that people were forced to do. It's not inherently bad to admit that that happened. That's just that she's just building a narrative that she's building a narrative with an intent that doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. So I just want to remind everybody first how awful Kamala Harris is. I already said that at the top of the hour that I think she's one of the most insincere politicians today. Um, I remember when Christine Blasey Ford was testifying about Kavanaugh, and the women in the Senate had a meeting or something, where some kind of press conference, and she's like, "Oh, I believe her," and I'm like, "Wait a sec, you didn't even hear her testify. She didn't even hear her yet." So you're a prosecutor. You automatically believe her, but you haven't even heard a thing that she said because it was political for her. I'm like, this is so insincere. And there's plenty of other circumstances where you can just kind of watch her in the Senate hearings and stuff, just her line of questioning and other stuff that she's just awful. But if you recall, ladies and gentlemen, once upon a time, she wanted to be the president of the United States. Didn't work out too well for her. But during the debates, she had some very interesting commentary about Joe Biden, former Senator Joe Biden, former Vice President Joe Biden, who's now President Joe Biden. Actually, she serves under his administration. She accepted that offer despite bringing up the fact that she believed he was a segregationist. She was like, "Bruh, you're a segregationist, and you kept me for you tried to stop me from integrating in schools. Didn't want that little racial jungle, as you put it, happening." She laid it out on the debate stage, and it was all planned. I'm sure, like, we're gonna hit him with this, and by the way, we're gonna have t-shirts that say that girl was me. It's gonna be a whole thing. And she laid into him. So here's a little snippet of memory lane if you guys don't recall.
Believe, and it's personal, and I was actually it was hurtful to hear you talk about the reputations of two United States senators who built their reputations and career on the segregation of race in this country. And it was not only that, but you also worked with them to oppose busing. And, you know, there was a little girl in California who was part of the second class to integrate her public schools. And she was bused to school every day. And that little girl was me. So I will tell you that on this subject, it cannot be an intellectual debate among Democrats. We have to take it seriously. We have to act swiftly. As Attorney General of California, I was very proud to put in place a requirement that all my special agents would wear body cameras and keep those cameras on.
Senator Harris, thank you. Vice President Biden, you have been invoked. We are going to give you a chance to respond. Vice President Biden.
So, I don't remember what he said after that. But she had t-shirts, bruh. She was ready to go. So Joe Biden, at first he said that he was going to pick a woman VP, and he had a lot of allegations about racial things within his administration. I mean, within his lifetime, just running different stuff that he said. As a matter of fact, I have this shirt. It's available on my website. This is denounced white supremacy defeat Joe Biden with a list of his racism on the back. So there's a list of different things on there, but there's a lot of things that rub people the wrong way with different things that he's said, like the poor kids are just as smart as white kids or something. There's the you can't go into a 7-Eleven without a slight Indian accent. A lot of people didn't like his policy on his drug policies and that led to like mass incarceration. People's feelings about it are very strong. Whether it was or wasn't the right policy is kind of more debated, but in the Democrat Party, it's modernly, it's not doesn't seem to be debated, whether it was the wrong or right thing to do. People feel very strongly about it being the wrong thing, but people felt differently at the time when crime was very high. But anyway, that's a negative blot on him. He's lied a lot about participating in the civil rights movement, like a lot, even though there's a lot of evidence that never happened, including his confession that it didn't happen. But that didn't stop him from lying repeatedly about it. Since we're on the subject, I do have that clip. I was going to play a little, maybe a moment later, but I might as well pull that up since we're talking about it. So Joe Biden has some questionable things in his repertoire. And so eventually, there's the "you ain't black" comment that ticked people off. That if you're having trouble deciding between me and Trump, you ain't black. So that was pretty offensive. So Charlemagne and I don't know who else signed the letter. Charlemagne is the only one I can remember off the top of my head. Got together and wrote a letter and said, you have to pick a black woman. So I think that narrowed it down. And I think there were better picks for Joe Biden to still have other than Kamala Harris. Because a lot of people weren't fond of Kamala Harris because she locked up a lot of people herself. And then she's just so fake. Like she bragged about listening to Tupac and smoking and stuff on the Breakfast Club. And they're like, ma'am, you, first of all, you like weren't in college when that song came out. So she like blatantly lied about this event or whatever. But she also locked people up. So it's not cool for you to say, yeah, I smoked it while I was dishing out like convictions and other stuff like that. So I didn't think she was a great pick. I think really, if I had to guess why it came down to those two, which I wrote about this, like maybe they thought there was a good chance they could win, but if they lost, there was nothing to lose because Joe Biden is very old. So he had to shoot his shot now or it wasn't going to happen. And Kamala Harris is kind of insufferable. So if she wins, they have their Democrat in office. But if they lose and her star never rises any more than this, it's kind of what she deserves. Who cares? So unfortunately they are in the White House. But Joe Biden, here's a clip. Now this is the RNC put all these snippets together, but there's a lot of different montages out there of this.
I did.
Let me start this over for you.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I did not march with a 12-point program. I marched with tens of thousands of others to change attitudes, and we changed attitudes.
He lied to voters, according to the New York Times, quoting aides of Biden's, about having marched in the civil rights movement.
I got involved in the civil rights movement.
I got involved in desegregated movie theaters. They organized voter registration drives. From the time I got involved as a high school kid in the civil rights movement.
But I was a kid involved in the civil rights movement, desegregating restaurants and movie theaters in my state.
From the time I got involved as a kid in the civil rights movement. Sit-ins and desegregating restaurants.
And I got involved in the civil rights movement just as a kid. And that's why I got so deeply involved in my community with the civil rights movement. When I sat in black churches on the east side of Wilmington getting ready to, and by the way, next to two Jewish rabbis, getting ready to go out and desegregate movie theaters in Delaware. I come out of the civil rights movement. I start off in black churches and we'd go from there to desegregate movie theaters. For real, I got involved in the civil rights movement.
From the time I've been 18 years old, I've been involved in causes from the civil rights movement.
Got involved in the civil rights movement and desegregating restaurants, that kind of thing. Coming out of the civil rights movement and being involved in the Jewish community as a kid in the civil rights movement.
I got involved in the civil rights movement and
Get ready to go out and desegregate restaurants and movie theaters.
that's what got me involved in civil rights as a kid.
I got very engaged, in my case, in the civil rights movement.
Quote, more than once, advisors had gently reminded Mr. Biden of the problem with this formulation. He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement, and more than once, Mr. Biden assured them that he understood and kept telling the story anyway. That is really, really weird.
So weird is a not strong word. He's just a liar. And it's something he's been lying about for a very, very, very long time, before the man had, gray hair, white hair, whatever. been lying about it for a very long time. So and repeatedly, I think it's pretty despicable to go into a black church and lie. It's just, I mean, it's despicable to lie about this anywhere, but you go to a black church and you lie to a congregation about your participation in the civil rights movement. That's pretty messed up. It's pretty messed up. But that's not the only thing that he lies about as far as like participation with helping the black community and black voters. And when he told Charlemagne, like, you ain't black if you don't, support me. And he's like, Charlemagne, I guess he expected Charlemagne just to laugh and be like, yeah, I agree, those, darn coon Republicans. He was like, no, it's not about Trump, it's about what's best for my community. And he's like, oh, check my record, man. I've been endorsed by the NAACP every time I've run. And well, I won't disagree that the NAACP probably supports him every time he runs. They don't publicly do that. So you can't say that they endorse you every time that you run. And then he started, saying other things that just blatantly weren't true. So then he tries to flex his resume, and then it's just he's saying things that are just lies. So if we're talking about revisionist history, whatever, Biden, Kamala, they're it. So anyway, Biden had a lot of different issues, and so that's one of the reasons why Kamala is a vice president. Because he at first he just said he was going to pick a woman. He didn't necessarily say he was going to pick a black woman. And then people were like, "You must pick a black woman if you want her support." Which, if he was problematic for you as the president, just because he picks some window dressing doesn't change the fact that whatever problems that you had with them still exist. So those people who sign on to that letter, that's pretty ridiculous. It's pretty ridiculous. But it happened, is what it is. They're, sitting in the Oval. That's life, I guess. But when Kamala was asked about her going at Joe Biden during the debate, like basically saying you're a segregationist who kept me from integrating in schools, that's her allegation, and not so many words. She was asked by Colbert about it, and she just laughed it off and was like, it's a debate, bruh. And so I'm going to try to play as little, if this is possible, so I don't get flagged. But he's like, you really hammered into him. So like, how are things now? Like, how do you reconcile that?
Debates.
I'm going to speed up a little bit.
And now you guys seem to be pals.
It was a debate.
Not everybody landed punches like you did, though.
It was a debate.
So you don't mean it?
It was a debate. That the whole reason, literally, it was a debate. It was called a debate.
I understand.
Traveled to the debate. There were journalists there covering the debate where there would be a debate.
So, I don't know why we didn't recognize it back then that she was just kind of dumb. I just thought maybe she's repeating the debate thing to get her point across, but she's not well with words. If you've listened to any of her monologues about like the passage of time and other stuff like that, maybe she was just stuck and couldn't think of anything else to say. But the point of that back and forth, that engagement there, was that he's like, you said some rough stuff, some really, really rough stuff. So how do we reconcile this? And she's like, that's just what I had to do. I had to shiv him. That's just how it works, bruh. We don't have to say real sincere things, or if I bring real things up, we just gotta like forget about that now. It's just I will do anything and say anything to get ahead. That's what she's really telling Colbert, in not so many words. So when she's talking about Florida or any of the opponents that she'll come up against and have to eventually debate on the stage or whatever, just keep in mind that she's a liar. She's a liar who will do and say anything for the purpose of getting ahead. So if that means she has to shiv someone in the back or slit their throat or, verbally or, politically, as far as career. I don't think I'm not saying that she would literally, knife someone. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. But what she did with Joe was pretty, surgical and planned. Not quite as beautiful as I think Tulsi Gabbard's takedown of her. But Kamala had to do whatever she needed to do to get ahead, to set herself apart. She had a bunch of different plans. There was one particular thing she talked about that was so silly that she turned to like Elizabeth Warren. She's like, "Don't you think we should do this?" And she's just like, "No." Like, I think it was some kind of censorship thing that was just so minuscule, but she did so much to try to set herself apart, and she had to end up dropping out before she got embarrassed in the primary, because she definitely couldn't even have won California. So, just keep in mind that Kamala Harris again is not a good person at all, in the least bit. So let's watch a little teeny snippet of, sorry, didn't mean to do that, of her stating in her speech about the different things that Florida said and how awful they were, and then we'll break down what's actually in it. So this is something that she posted on her Twitter page herself. Or not herself, but somebody did.
What slavery really involved. It involved rape. It involved torture. It involved taking a baby from their mother.
So many comments I could make there, man.
So in the context of that, how is it that anyone could suggest that in the midst of these atrocities, that there was any benefit to being subjected to this level of dehumanization? In the midst of these atrocities, that there was some benefit.
So, again, not like it's a good thing that any of this happened. Well, when she said separating children from their mothers, I'm like, abortion does that, but surrogacy does that. Especially like, I mean, I guess it's different if you're doing it for like a family member or something like that. But like, there's a lot of dudes out here, and in California, they are trying to say that two men are infertile, so they want to get, I guess, benefits or whatever to pay for their surrogacy. You're not infertile, you're just two dudes. It's not really the same as a woman having different fertility issues, and you're not entitled to another woman's womb. And I know this is like a touchier subject for folks that we haven't talked a lot about. I mention it here every now and then. Allie Beth Stuckley has some really good content on this, but they'll like buy an egg from someone, and then they'll rent out a womb, and they do that to separate the legal right, any kind of legal claim, from that woman. And there was a story that was going around. I talked about it a little bit, but Allie Stuckley actually does have an interview with a surrogate mom, but she was carrying a baby for these two gay men, and she ended up developing cancer, and they wanted her to abort the baby, and she was just trying to at least make it so that she could make it to the point where they could induce the labor and perhaps save the baby. But they didn't want that at all. They just wanted a death certificate. And the hospital like wouldn't induce the labor. So her OB had to help her find someone else who would help her induce the labor. And they were really mean about it. And this was really aggressive cancer. They're like, you at first she was going to try to kind of wait it out, do other kind of, medications to try to help the baby get to term as far along as possible. But it was so aggressive that they're like, you need to do this ASAP. So basically, as soon as she went to labor, not like immediately, but pretty much she had to start getting treatment. But the baby did not end up surviving. But really egregious, dark story in the surrogacy side. And I'm not saying people don't have good experiences, and there's obviously kids who are born of surrogacy. I know people who are surrogates and they're great people. But I just, there's some dark stuff I think this needs to be talked about a bit more. So anyway, moving on. Kamala Harris, again, making it seem like they're saying that slavery is a good thing. The framing of it, or the intent of her interpretation of their intent that she's making up, appears to be that slavery is a good thing because people learned good skills. Like you're lucky it happened to you, I guess. It is kind of the framing I think they're trying to get around or interpret or put into people's brains, that sort of meaning behind it. When again, the truth is just a blatant fact that people are always resilient, particularly African Americans are very resilient in our history in the US. There's a lot of people who argue that we shouldn't have Black History Month or whatever. I love history. I think it's really fascinating. I think that time is very fascinating. I love hearing stories of people who persevered through this dark period of time. It's like it's like Rocky. You watch Rocky, which I actually am not a big Rocky fan, but probably sounds un-American or something. But I don't want to get into reasons why I'm not. But the overall story, what I mean is that you see this is an underdog story. This underdog is persevering through it all, and so you see that within people like Frederick Douglass and other historical figures like that. So I love learning about that period of history. People are like, oh, Republicans, they don't want to teach. I think Republicans really find that time fascinating, especially since that's when their party began. They were the party to free the slaves and push all that stuff. So I actually don't get all the narrative about them not liking that period of history. I actually wrote a historical fiction fantasy. Those of you who follow me for a while know that I write books, but one of the particular series that I did is a historical fiction fantasy. I'm not gonna say it's the most historically accurate thing ever, but it's got the second book covers like the draft riots and other stuff like that. So it's like meet like X-Men in that era, kind of is what the story is. So I really like history. I find it fascinating. It's just the fact that people persevere through bad times. It can make the most of it. It doesn't justify what happens. It doesn't justify what happens. So if you've convinced yourself to be so angry about this, stop. Just seriously, just stop. So again, the National Review wrote an article detailing how ridiculous Kamala is and how much of a lie this is. And she's probably just going, but she saw a thing, went by some talking points, hasn't looked that deeply into it, and doesn't have to, doesn't feel that she has to. And the media doesn't make it so that they have to. They will get their marching orders and their talking points, and they'll say whatever they want to say. So this is a pretty long article, so I'm probably going to read a lot of it. But NBC reports that Kamala Harris intends to visit Florida today to criticize its new school curriculum, which already happened. In remarks Thursday, Harris blasted efforts in some states to ban books to push forward revisionist history. Just yesterday in the state of Florida, they decided middle school students will be taught that enslaved people benefited from slavery. And she said at a convention for the traditionally Black sorority Delta Sigma Theta Incorporated. They insult us and attempt to gaslight us, and we will not stand for it. This is a brazen lie. It's an astonishing lie, and it's an evil lie. It's so untrue, so deliberately and cynically misleading that in a sensible political culture, Harris would be obligated to issue an apology. Instead, NBC confirms that she will repeat the lie today during a speech. Rid of that. I have been trying to work out how to best illustrate the sheer scale of Harris's falsehood, and I've come to the conclusion that the only way to achieve it is to list in one place all the relevant parts of the course about which she is complaining. So below, I have copied and pasted every single reference to slavery, slaves, abolition, civil rights, and African Americans that is in the document. For those interested, the full curriculum, along with the curriculum for the teaching the Holocaust, is there in that link. So if you guys want to check out that article later. The list is extremely long. That's because Pace Harris, there's a lot in there. If you are able to read it and conclude that the single reference to slaves developing skills, which I've bolded, is indicative of the narrative direction of the course rather than the tiny and correct part of it, then you are beyond saving and you deserve to live your life as an ignoramus. There is simply no way of pursuing this course and concluding that it gaslights people or whitewashes slavery, among many, many other things. It includes sections on the conditions for Africans during their passage to America, the living conditions of slaves in British North American colonies, the Caribbean, Central America, and South America, including infant mortality rates, the harsh conditions of their consequences or British American plantations, under undernourishment, climate conditions, infant and child mortality rates of the enslaved versus the free, the harsh conditions of the Caribbean plantations, poor nutrition, rigorous labor disease, how the South tried to prevent slaves from escaping in their efforts to end the Underground Railroad, the overwhelming death rates caused by the practice, in many ways in which Africans resisted slavery, the ramifications of prejudice, racism, and stereotyping on individual freedoms, and the struggles faced by African American women in the 19th century as it relates to issues of suffrage, business, and access to education. Many of these modules apply to Florida specifically. And this sounds like it's a lot, and there's a lot here, and I can tell you a lot of things that I've learned learned on my own. By the way, when you're adult, or just, you don't have to be an adult, like you don't have to spend your time playing Minecraft. As a kid, you can go to the library, you can pick up a book, you can use the internet to research and search different things. You can, spend time with your kids learning outside stuff. You can homeschool your kids and teach them very extensive, expansive, curriculum and all this stuff. You could do that. There's nothing stopping you from consuming knowledge. In this day and age, you can do it. And people being so mad about what the tiny portions of stuff that we learn in school, to be honest, when we're kids, we want in and out. You learn what you have to, you go on. Like, there's people who have particular career paths and they make the most of their time in the school or whatever. But most people, it's like, you tell me I have to learn this. This is what I will learn so I can pass this course and move on with my life. But there's a lot of people not very interested in history. I said I was interested in history, but I didn't take like extra history classes. I took, what was pretty much required. And just as an older, woman, I just, was interested in learning a lot of stuff. I like to watch a lot of documentaries or I like to watch, period pieces and stuff. And then I'm the type of person, like, if I'm watching something, I'm like looking up stuff. I'm like, did this happen that way? I'm like, oh my gosh. And, I like to research and other stuff like that. So I'm interested in that. Other folks, they might not be into it, but you are accountable for yourself, especially as an adult. So there's more that you want to learn. You can learn stuff, but I can't, the things that they listed, I can't say that I remember anything like the extensiveness on this list that was taught. Like, I spent half of my education career in a urban school, and then the rest of my career was like at a rural school. And again, I didn't take like a special history class, just like what was, econ and US history and other stuff like that. Um, but we did have like big like Black History Month programs and stuff when I was, going to school in my urban community. But the things that we learned, we all usually there was like these special booklets, usually it was like the repeat kind people, that most people are aware of, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, etc. And we had special plays, but those things were like highlighted during Black History. And if you integrate this stuff in so well within like courses, you shouldn't need to have like particular studies unless you have like particular classes, like like a particular elective or something like that. But this seems like it's a lot. Like, um, um, I just remember going to my siblings and asking, like, did you know about this kind of stuff? Like, John Brown, for example. I'm like, did you know there was like someone going around like doing like vigilante justice? And then my older sister was like, they didn't teach us that's something like that. She's like, they didn't teach us nothing like that. And she graduated from the inner city school, and and I asked all my siblings, like, do you know about John Brown? No, it seemed like nobody. I don't remember anyone saying, yeah, I know about John Brown. And I asked my dad, and he's like, yeah, we knew about John Brown. But there was a parent. I don't know what he did or didn't learn in school, but he referenced that there was a movie, like an old movie that they saw. So there's a lot of things that we're not being taught, that we don't know. But again, it's not too late to go out there and educate and learn about this different stuff. And I understand, again, not everybody wants to be a history major. And that's fine if you don't, but to the people who complain about this stuff, just go access the material. Just go access the material. And if these schools aren't teaching your kid well enough, please go homeschool your kid. Like, we would love that. People, like, I think it's better if you do homeschool your kid. So here's where the list begins. It's a long list, so I don't think we'll go through all of it. But instruction includes what life was like for the earliest slaves and the emancipated in North America. Examine the Underground Railroad and how former slaves partnered with other free people and groups in assisting those escaping from slavery. Examine key figures and events in abolitionist movements. Instruction will include the Emancipation Proclamation, 13, 14, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. Examine the roles and contributions of significant African Americans during westward expansion. Examine the experiences and contributions of African Americans early Florida. Instruction includes African American communities. Understand the causes, courses, and consequences of the slave trade in colonies. Does that sound like slavery was good? No, it doesn't. Identify Afro-Eurasia trade routes and methods prior to the development of the Atlantic slave trade. Instruction includes how slavery was utilized in Asia, European, and African cultures. Or maybe they mad about that. Instruction includes similarities and differences between serfdom and slavery. Describe the contact of European explorers with systemic slave trading in Africa. Instruction includes the comparative treatment of indentured servants of European and African extraction. Instruction includes the transition from indentured to slave-based economy. Describe the history of evolution of the slave codes. Instruction includes judicial and legislative actions concerning slavery. That sounds pretty interesting. Analyzing slave revolts that happened in early colonial America and how political leaders reacted. Sounds very interesting. Examine the service and sacrifice of African patriots during the Revolutionary Era. That's great. Analyze events that involved or affected Africans from the founding of the nation throughout the Reconstruction. Explain early congressional actions regarding the institution of slavery, explain the effect of the cotton industry on the expansion of slavery due to Eli Whitney's cotton gin, examine the various duties and trades. By the way, they like trashed the agriculture in the South by working that ground so terribly hard. George Washington Carver really helped to, help them revitalize their economy, which I think is very um, interesting considering that he himself was a former slave, but still, he was into agriculture and other stuff like that, of course, obviously, but helping to develop a way to um, help this part of the nation that did something so awful. So he was someone who of course he also taught, but he really he was a very strong Christian, and very fascinating guy. If you don't know more than like the common thing you learn in a booklet in elementary school, I'd recommend looking up some more of these people. Examine the various duties of the trades performed by slaves. Instruction includes how slaves develop skills which in some instances could be applied for their personal benefit. So that's that little section there. There, obviously there's a lot of things that we already got to, and there's still plenty more. Instruction includes how collaboration of free blacks, whites, churches, and organizations assisted in the Underground Railroad. That's something that people really need to know and stress about. But I mean, usually you go through a history book and there's particular chapters on things that can be long, or but some things are just like little paragraphs, like little sections and stuff. So I'm not saying that people don't cover this stuff, but maybe just like not largely, like a lot of it kind of seems like that this is how it's described is they're trying to do something pretty robust, and it's a shame that um that they're focusing on that little thing, and again implying such intent to it. But I really really think people need to understand how churches and other folks came together to really try to that helped people on the Underground Railroad, and learn about John Rankin and other folks who really wanted to end slavery. There was especially because there's such animosity toward America and also religion. If I've talked about this graphic a lot, but there's an infographic that the Smithsonian put out, particularly the African American History Museum, the 4-level one in DC. And so there's an infographic on whiteness and whiteness in America, and they include Judeo-Christian stuff. And I think it's interesting because if you look at the document, which I've shared many times, I just saw a click on a few of the pictures here so you guys know what I'm talking about if you haven't seen it before. Maybe some of you are first time viewers, I don't know. But you can just Google this and find it pretty easily. But talking about white culture in America, this is one of the most racist things I've ever seen. I mention this all the time. So they it just kind of reads like oh, communism, right? You guys are really into trying to tear down some of our institutions, and I think the goal here is to paint a lot of things that are good, like I don't know, being on time for work and aspiring to be with a man with a good career and other things, or I don't know, having private property they associate with being white, whiteness. So if you do have those attributes, that doesn't mean that you're white, but it just means that you've been impacted by whiteness. And if you don't have those attributes, like being cooperative and polite and respecting authority, those things are on the list, then that's not your fault, because those are white standards. So anyway, I really really saw this attitude being pushed in 2020, for example, and I noticed some people around me were kind of repeating some of that negative sentiment and stuff, like BLM kind of stuff. And so I did a I ended up doing like a PowerPoint presentation for our Bible study and talking about um how the Great Awakenings helped America to lead to the abolition of slavery. And I talked about different abolitionists and other things like that. And so it was I have to find the PowerPoint somewhere. I'm sure I have it somewhere, but it was a really good lesson, and I think it turned the tide in a positive direction because I haven't really heard any of that nonsense since then. But it's good that people know that there are actually that not everybody with a white face was evil, like, at least in the country. And it's funny because if you're so many people say to me that, oh, that's the religion of your oppressors and that's a white man's religion, but at the same time they'll say Jesus was black, and I'm like, I'm very confused. I'm very confused. And it's true that people would use religion to try to for their own gain, for their own benefit. That's not a modern concept at all. You could see that in the Bible itself. People use religion for their own sort of twisted gain, a perversion of it. But if you do look at like slave Bibles and stuff, they took a lot out. They took like the Exodus gone. They would take out certain passages, a lot of passages, anything that could give people the wrong ideas. So yes, people use the gospel and a perverted version of Christianity to try to instill servitude within their slaves. But it took a perversion of that. So people who were like in the reading the actual gospel and they're like, God is no respecter of persons. And there's particular things in the Bible about how, you know, you're not supposed to like kidnap people and other things. I'd be like, oh, if you followed these rules, we wouldn't have the slave trade as it existed in the United States of America anyway. So those kinds of things you couldn't actually like have in the Bible, and people getting the wrong ideas. So I think it would be good for people to know those kinds of things. And I think there's maybe a particular group of people who wouldn't really want that to be the case. So there there's more stuff in here. It's a long list. Um, so I'd encourage you guys to go ahead and check out that article for National Review, or you could go read the whole entire curriculum yourself. It's just really not what the vice president, still scrolling, um was what she pitched. It's really not. And again, Kamala Harris is the worst. Just a really profound liar. So you guys can go check that out on your own time and read some more of their little snippets that they shout out. I wanted to also play. We're already over an hour. We've only talked about this particular subject. I do want to mention that there was an. By the way, Ron DeSantis didn't write this curriculum. um, so when people are like, "Oh, Ron DeSantis is racist," no, you're accusing of the people who put this together of trying to do revisionist history, and that's silly. So ABC News had played a little snippet of this interview, and so we're gonna with Dr. William B. Allen, and so he's I have a thread that I'm gonna play these snippets of this interview from, so you can at least see a little bit more commentary about this, and then I want to address what Ron DeSantis said before she came to town and what I think that he should do, or and then we'll move on to the next subject. I didn't mean to go quite this long on this topic, but it's an important topic, and it's worth talking about.
So there's been a little bit of backlash to these standards that were put out, and like you said, that these were these were done in open session so the public could, listen or watch along. What would you say to critics who say these standards have set education back?
Well, I can't answer critics whom I haven't seen or heard. The only criticism I've encountered so far is a single one that was articulated by the vice president, and which was an error. As I stated in my response to the vice president, it was categorically false. It was never said that slavery was beneficial to Africans. What was said, and anyone who reads this will see this with clarity, it is the case that Africans proved resourceful, resilient, and adaptive, and were able to develop skills and aptitudes which served to their benefit, both while enslaved and after enslavement.
So, obviously, I'm going to play a couple more of these clips. Someone asked where that article is that we just went through. It's the National Review. It's Kamala Harris is lying about Florida's slavery curriculum. That's the article headline, but it's with the National Review. Here you go.
So you would say that you're standing by these standards, even though the vice president was very verbose yesterday.
Well, I will repeat to Mr. McCarty that I'm not claiming authorship, but I'm certainly willing to stand behind the work of my members in the task force and to stand behind the collaborative process. I have read, of course, all the standards. I am quite confident in their validity and their historical accuracy and their motivations and intent.
So you would say that you're
okay.
Amid all of this, that do you think the wording should be amended?
I do not. No, I think it would be effectively to erase people's history. And let me illustrate that for you, if I may. My great-grandfather is someone who came from the islands and who was enslaved here, and whose own resourcefulness, resilience, and adaptiveness was certainly instrumental in producing for his family, his descendants, the ability to prosper here in this country. Hence, from his resourcefulness, we derive benefits. I think anyone who would try to change that language would be denying that great-grandfather Sidious made any contribution. I certainly could not endorse doing that.
Amid all.
So there's two more clips.
This was a group effort, along with everyone on the task force. Do you have a message to people out there who may be only consuming this news through a broadcast like ours or reading on the internet? Is there a message that you want to send to people out there about this task force and the product that it delivered to the state?
Yes, I would certainly say to people, I know that people can't engage in the in-depth research, which stands behind many of the task force members and a product like this, but they need to know that it is available to them. They can read John Hope Franklin, who wrote an extensive work on the history of Africans from the 17th century well into the 19th century, which shows copious examples of what we describe. Similarly, Henry Louis Gates, whose slave narratives offer examples also, and Paul Finkelman's Encyclopedia of African American History, or the more recent work by David Hackett Fisher on African founders. And I would ask people to bear in mind that when we talk about the resourcefulness of those people subject to the oppression of slavery, we're not talking only about the United States. We're talking about people worldwide, and particularly in the islands before they came often to the United States, as well as those who came directly from Africa. We're talking about the experience of oppression and how people respond to the experience of oppression. And we want people to recognize that there's an opposite to Stockholm syndrome. People don't necessarily simply embrace their oppressors when they're oppressed. They also react adaptively, and they find ways to make pathways for themselves, even in the presence of oppression. And that's what calls upon their resourcefulness, their resilience, and their adaptability. And from these things, we begin to see how it becomes possible for some people to see that even though people were enslaved, they made great contributions to the growing prosperity of this society.
Well said. And here's the last snippet.
Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, not in particular. If you have a question, I'm happy to answer it, but I just want to foster and encourage everyone to take the time to read. For as I said in my response to the Vice President, I think every intellect can understand the language written there. People will only take the time to read it. And it's only those who don't take the time to read it who will misstate it.
Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to?
So that's it. This is an interesting controversy because people were mad not too long ago about them Xing out an AP African American histories class, and the reason why they rejected it is not because they didn't want people to reach to understand or know about Black history or anything. It had a bunch of queer theory stuff in it and other woke stuff. So what does that have to do with African American studies and history and stuff? And so it's amazing what controversies they have and what they want to try to highlight to make into a scandal versus what they want to sneak in and obviously don't want to talk about. And queer theory, and you can be gay and not like queer theory. Queer theory there's a clip that's going around of this professor talking about it's like queer theory Jeopardy, and they just keep associating or revealing the sort of pedo nature of queer theory. So it's a good clip. I was trying to find it before I went live, but I'm sure it's on YouTube somewhere that you can probably find pretty easy. I was trying to find it on Twitter because it's the easiest way for me to download stuff. But if I reclip this, I will probably include that clip. But they wanted to have all this woke stuff, and you just send your kids to school and you want them to learn some facts about history. You want them to learn math and science, and you don't want them to be indoctrinated with all kinds of different crazy stuff. So they just needed to take out some of that woke stuff, and it was fine. But it became a big story. So last thing I want to address is Ron DeSantis. So he had a response to Kamala Harris before she came into town or she was making her way or whatever, and he just kind of blew it off.
I mean, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. It's totally outrageous. You guys can look on the website of the Florida Department of Education. They got a lot of scholars together to do a lot of standards and a lot of different things, but these are the most robust standards in African American history, probably anywhere in the country. Anyone who reads that will see that it's very thorough, very factual, and for them to try to demagogue it, look, that may have worked in the past. Nobody's buying their nonsense anymore, and so she's going to come down to the state of Florida and try to chirp and try to demagogue. All she's doing is ignoring the responsibilities that the administration has to secure our border. They're failing at that. They're not developing enough domestic energy. They need to. They're not doing what we need to do to counteract China in the Pacific. And so on and on it goes. They're dropping the ball. So it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to do that. But this board, they got these people there, and they really were very thorough. So I would just encourage everyone to read it for yourself. Yes, ma'am.
So yeah, great for him to recommend just going through it and reading it for themselves, and people can see that it's very robust, and that if you're any kind of critical thinker, intellectual, you can look at it and like, oh, okay, Kamala Harris is an idiot. But him saying they've tried this in the past and people aren't buying it, I think that's kind of naive. there was a lot of media narrative, for example, with the "Don't Say Gay" bill, which is a parental rights and education bill. I did a lot of content about it, argued with a lot of people on TikTok about it, and other places covered it during the live show quite a bit. I read the whole thing. It's very short, so it's so some bills like omnibuses have like thousands of pages, and you're like, we can't read that all on the air, obviously, but people being so passionate about the particular bill, and it was just literally a couple pages long, was silly because it had nothing to do with you not being able to say gay, and it was a needed bill, and I've gone through why it was a needed and necessary bill. But of course, the media, there was a narrative online, the huge accounts that were spreading misinformation about this on TikTok was crazy. I'm talking about people with millions and millions of followers helping to spread that message. But you also had like mainstream media taking that nickname. They didn't call it parental rights and education bill. They called it the "Don't Say Gay" bill because that's what the Democrats want it called. That was a smear tactic. So I don't know, whatever in Florida happened with them being able to get that message out and poll people, and like, do you actually agree with this? When they actually showed people the language of the bill, people like, oh yeah, I think that's a good thing. Even independents and Democrats and stuff, you believed it was a good thing. So there's a reason why Ron DeSantis, there can be all this controversy around him nationally, but he can win by 19 points in Florida. How and some people aren't into the political kind of wars or cultural war stuff, but they think the trains are running on time or whatever, and they think he's a competent governor, even though they may not agree with him on some social stuff, because he did win by 19 points. But when it comes to the outside world, outside of Florida, and people who, I don't know, aren't in your algorithm on TikTok and aren't on your Facebook page where they see your information, where you're debunking stuff, maybe they just watch some segments on the news here or there, and unfortunately they watch CNN or something, so they only have a particular narrative. So if the narrative is, because there's still plenty of people who repeat the "Don't Say Gay" bill as if they're not clowns, just pushing lies. There's people who don't like DeSantis, and think he's sketchy on the racial stuff, and there's plenty of people who like DeSantis, and love him, are going to vote for him, including plenty of Black Republicans and stuff. However, I've heard of Black Republicans like, I'm on the fence. I don't know if I can rock with him because there's some things that sound problematic. And I was talking to somebody, I'm just trying to explain different like the AP curriculum class and stuff, and they heard me, but it was just like, I don't know. So I think there's a barrier that they're going to have to continue to break down. So it's, he's good when he's, the press are asking him stuff and he's direct and he's, duking it out with them. That's one of the reasons why people really like Trump, because he wasn't afraid to take on the media. And that's one reason why Romney fizzled out, because he wanted to be adored by them. And Trump does actually like being liked by them too, but it's a interesting relationship he has with the media. But so DeSantis can take it right to him, but if there's this attitude that it's just not gonna work, people aren't gonna believe it, I wouldn't be too confident about that. At all. They're really going to have to break it down why this is a really big lie, and they're gonna have to even start like not just left wing ultra folks who are minorities, even people within his own party. And I say that as someone who's had to have some conversations with some people, and I'm like, that's interesting and kind of not good. So I don't live in Florida. I don't look at their daily polling on the stuff all the time, but I have talked to some folks from there, and I just raise an eyebrow or two after some particular conversation. So I just don't think he should be, I wouldn't say that was nonchalant, because I mean he took on the press or whatever, but that attitude of like, it's not working, I wouldn't be confident that at this point it's not working. You're probably have to push back that narrative very, very hard. But that's one reason why I do what I do. And we have these conversations. I was glad to share that article. I'm glad that people were interested about that. Please, share that information and just um and remind people that Kamala Harris was willing to say that Joe Biden was a white supremacist. I mean, and again, in not so many words, but she accused him of trying to keep her from integrating in schools because he was pro segregation, and now she's sitting, as his VP. So, and was like, oh, was that a debate? Like, not a big deal. So she's an insincere person who will say whatever for political gain. So just please, you don't have to take. You can say you don't have to take my word for it. Just look at the curriculum and ask yourself, does this sound like they're trying to do revisionist history about how slavery was a good thing? If you just look at it yourself. So, moving on, I do want to cover the other topic that I said I would cover, even though we're late and probably going to go into 2 hours, but it's okay. You guys are still here. So, oh gosh, that was a big strike of lightning. I don't know if you guys heard that. Maybe we won't go to 2 hours, but we'll see. We'll try. Anyway, there's this clip going around of this interview about the Snow White movie. Last week we talked about the film, and we talked about the dwarves and how woke that is in particular. They decided after like Peter Dinklage spoke up. He was an actor who was in Elf and Game of Thrones. He thought it was backwards or backwoods or whatever to have dwarves for some reason, even though they're very heroic in the film. They're very much the heroes of the story, and it's about them and Snow White. It's about them more than like the actual prince. So they decided to only cast one dwarf, and the rest are average sized people, I guess, and one's actually a woman, and they're different ethnicities and so on. So it's I have a video about it. Snow White and the 7 Seattle encampment hobos, I think is what it's called, the video, when I talk about it. So it's obviously woke, and this particular conversation is being talked about, this interview, for good reason.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign.
So Rachel Ziegler is the actress who's playing Snow White. She's obviously not white. That was a little bit of a conversation. Not hasn't been as huge. I mean, when that first was announced, it was a bigger conversation. It hasn't been anywhere as huge, I think, as like Ariel being played by Halle Bailey, especially once the pictures came out and her hair wasn't the right shade of red. But obviously she's not as white as snow. She is kind of a little pale, fair skin, but not quite what we had probably had in mind. But I think the dwarf thing is a way bigger deal. But this idea of it's not 1937, we don't need a prince to save us, is so silly. And I'm not saying you dream of someone saving, which a lot of people dream of their circumstances changing and evolving into some kind of like marriage and family is really like the point of so much of our society. I know there's some people who never want to get married and don't want a relationship, whatever, and that's it is what it is. But you do what you feel is right for you. But we literally need that to go on. And it's something that so many people crave, need, desire, and even women who are so certain that they don't want it, they get a little older and they're like, oh, did I miss my shot? Because now I've had my career and I've done this and I'm in my later 30s and I'm wondering if if it's possible, if it's gonna happen, or if you're gonna be a spinster. So we prioritize a lot of the wrong things um in life. And I think it's really important when you think of the Snow White film. I went back earlier and watched a few clips. It's been a long time since I've seen the film, like in its entirety. But um, the prince was dreaming of her too. It's not just in these films that these women want companionship, that they want marriage, that they want a different life, that they want their own family. These men want it too. And I think that's important. And I think that that's good. Like she was, her evil stepmother had her dressed in rags or whatever 'cause she was jealous of her. She forced her to be a servant, just to clean up and other stuff like that. And she was at a wishing well singing about her true love, like, she's hoping that she meet her true love that day. And then he heard her singing, and then he came up on her, and she got a little startled, and she went inside, and he just, sang to her while she's on the balcony, and then she starts swooning. And so that's their little romance. And I don't think he comes back in the film again until the very end. Once she was in the glass coffin, and he had heard about the beautiful maiden. He was looking for her, searching for her, and then he eventually found her. And he was sad to see that her in a coffin. um and he just kissed her real quick. Like, people are like, oh, it's creepy. I mean, it's weird, but I hadn't seen it in a long time. It was like, and over. And he didn't expect her to wake up. He just, got down and knelt down, was sad. And then she like immediately woke up, and they happy, and they hugged. And she said goodbye to the dwarves and kissed them all on the forehead and stuff. They got on the horse, and they rode off into the sunset together, start their new life together. But again, she wasn't the only one dreaming of romance and a new life. He was too. There's a film called Austin Land. And Austin Land is a take on Jane Austen. So there's this place that people would go to. They pay for an experience that was like a Jane Austen experience. So they go on this you know this house and this land and stuff, where it's like everybody was dressing like that era clothing, and they would use that sort of old time speech. And they'd have to apply by those rules. They couldn't have modern technology. They were just immersed in that experience. And so people would pay to have like a romance encounter. And so the main character, Jane, erstwhile, she was obsessed with Jane Austen and Pride and Prejudice and Mr. Darcy. And so she paid with what money she had. And it was only enough for the copper package. So everybody treated her very poorly, because she was like the poor girl, hanging with the elites. And so she had a friend who was who she met there, who was not the brightest chick, but she's very sweet and also very loaded. So they're just kind of like, you know what, make your own story. So she kind of gave herself like a upgrade, with her wardrobe and whatever, and was like, I'm going to get myself a happy ending. And so there was a guy there, Mr. Nobley, and who was like supposed to be the Mr. Darcy type character. And so she went back and forth with him, and there was another guy too. And so, sorry to spoil the movie. I'm not going to say the whole thing, but I brought it up to mention the ending. And so this ending is important to the point that I'm making, bring up the Snow White stuff. She ends up going back home and is like, I don't need to live in a fantasy. She cleans out a lot of her stuff and is kind of like, because she was obsessed. And so Henry Nobley comes to her door, and then she's just kind of like, what are you doing here? So he explains that he's actually fallen in love with her. And and so they begin to like kiss and stuff. And she's like, wait a second. She's like, this is a fantasy. This stuff doesn't happen in real life. And he's like, have you maybe you're going about this all wrong. Have you ever stopped to consider that you're my fantasy? So girls have it in this head like, oh, you dream about this guy, you dream about this guy, but it's not like men don't desire companionship. It's not like men don't want a woman who is kind, compassionate, and nurturing. Now, all of Snow White isn't the type of girl who like, let's go get a sword and save the kingdom. There's been different kind of stories that have had a different spin, like Snow White and the Huntsman, for example. And like she literally fought the queen, the evil queen. There's Once Upon a Time, Snow White was the bandit, and then she would fight and stuff with the dwarves. I watched that entire series, but so there's people who definitely do different takes, but the Walt Disney animated version of Snow White, she is a child. Younger than the actress who's portraying her for certain. And so you had this stepmother who was jealous of this young woman, that she's pretty, that she that people love her or whatever. She just couldn't take it, so she treated her like garbage. She wanted her dead and out of the picture because she this is someone who just is envious of the next generation and just can't take it. She just can't take it, so she tries to destroy it. And the Huntsman, helped her. Adults should help children not be killed. And she goes to the dwarf's place, and she thinks kids live there or whatever. So they come in, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, you're little men!" And the kindness that she just spreads to these dwarves changed their lives. Like Grumpy was like, "I was a woman, you get infected," and he just had this weird perception. Like he called her particular name. They're like, "What does that mean?" He's like, "I don't know, but I don't want to catch it." So they had these particular perceptions, and she just brought joy to their lives and discipline to their lives. Like she made him like, I'm cooking dinner, go clean up, go wash up, your hands are filthy, you were working in the mines, like get it together. And she brought meaning to them in a way that they were unaware that they were even missing something to begin with. And that's the power of women in a man's life. And it seems like we just want to reject that, to be a girl boss. And there's nothing wrong with going out there and getting a bag, but what is it for? What is it for? Like men going out there getting their careers and all that kind of stuff. What is it for? Isn't it to build a life with someone, to forge a family so you can continue on with civilization? So this dissing of what came before, like it wasn't good enough, like it should just be revolted and like, oh, it was so 1937, which by the way, the animation, everything probably blew their minds back then. And Walt Disney loved Snow White. He was always trying to kind of recapture that magic of that film. He loved it so much. And anyway, when the witch went, when she found out she was alive, she went to go, she changed herself. She was so desperate to be the prettiest one, and ended up like ruining her, made herself look ugly, brought that ugliness to the surface to take out, that person. People think these stories are so like simple, but there's so much complexity when you analyze, different lessons or whatever. But so she goes out there to kill her, and she, the poison apple, etc. And then the dwarves like take her down. They hunt her down with their slingshots. I said it was pickaxes the other day, but maybe they should use pickaxe in the new movie. But they had like slingshots or whatever, and they ran her up a mountain, and the lightning struck, and she fell to her death. And then they, had the funeral scene and stuff. And they built a glass coffin because they just couldn't bear the thought of putting her in the ground. They couldn't bear it. And of course, in the prince stuff comes, but she just sowed kindness and sweetness into their lives and profoundly changed them for the better. And I've mentioned this before. I'll mention this again. It was the dwarves who were the heroes of the story. It wasn't really the prince. He came in and did the true love's kiss thing, and she woke up. So that was great and everything. But the ones who built a little home for her, and they didn't build it, but I mean that metaphorically and emotionally. Um, and when she was in danger, when she the witch tried to take her out, they're the ones who went to war for her. And they just sobbed when they thought she was dead and stuff. Profoundly changed their lives for the better. And that's the power of a woman. That's the power of a woman. And I'm not saying I don't like I dislike these new takes. Snow White and the Huntsman was, I'm not huge into like epic fantasies like that, but it was okay. I thought costumes and it was a very like aesthetically great thing to look at, and the soundtrack was amazing. The Florence and the Machine song, the Breath of Life song, it's great. I've listened to that many times on repeat, writing like epic scenes. I'm like, oh, so there's some great things that came out that film. Obviously not Kristen Stewart cheating on Robert Pattinson with the director, but the film was fine. I wouldn't have cast Kirsten Stewart for Snow White, but it was like Ferris blood or whatever, like a pure of heart sort of thing. Because I'm like, Charlize, I don't want to sound mean, but I'm like, Charlize Theron is jealous of, well, we'll just say anybody. Charlize is a pretty good looking woman. So they took a big battle approach at the end with that film, and again, Once Upon a Time, revamped and stuff, but and again, I accept that Disney's live action stuff is different. I don't know, I don't think that it really should be that different from their animated stuff that they did. I think most people would like to see kind of like a shot for shot recreation, just in a different medium. And I've accepted that they've changed a lot of things, and it is what it is. But I just don't like them having such disgust for what came before them, and this idea again that oh, we don't need a man to save us, so much that you want to change plot. Just make a new movie at that point. If there's so much about it that you disliked, you didn't like that they were the dwarves, you didn't like that she was white, you didn't like that the prince saved her from true love with true love's kiss or whatever, which is a pretty prominent thing in the story. Like even Once Upon a Time, Snow and Charming, they saved each other a lot, but she still needed that kiss from Charming to get her out the glass coffin. So I don't know what they're gonna do, but them bragging about not needing the prince or whatever, he was like literally in 2 scenes in the whole film. What the heck is he gonna do for the rest of them? Also in the Little Mermaid film, in the animated version, Eric stabs Ursula with his ship, and that's how she dies after she becomes like a giant kraken. And in the movie, Ariel steers the ship herself, quite the accomplishment for a non-sailor, I suppose, right into Ursula, and so she kills her herself. And there's some people who like that twist. I didn't like that twist. I mean, full disclosure, I did not go to the theater to see that film. I did see that clip. And I think it's important in the film that Eric did kill her because, first of all, her dad is so concerned about the human world, not a fan of whatever, and he got to see the lengths that this human was willing to go to save this woman that he loved. Because she's like, Daddy, I love me. He's like, oh, you are a crazy person. And then it became apparent that they had strong feelings. Now, I particularly think it's important because he was just about to marry a whole nother woman. Like he was under a spell, but she was just like, here's some redemption, sir. Go grab your spear, your harpoon or whatever, and go to battle. But Ariel not needing him in the end, or him being like just some accessory, like the kin to Barbie or whatever. I didn't see that movie, and I don't think I'm gonna go hate watch it or pay to see it. So if you want to watch commentary on it, there's a ton of different people doing commentary on it. So but that's kind of the idea of like, you know, you don't need the men in your lives. And I think men are great, and I think men and women are very complementary toward each other, and what they bring out in each other, or what they're capable of bringing out in each other, is pretty profound. And again, you need those relationships to be able to create the world that we live in. And men and women building families, they really civilize men in a pretty profound way. And children civilize women in a pretty profound way as well. You Nothing will grow you up like, having another little human being to take care of and to think about them and etc. And this idea like, oh, they're dreaming of their princess. Well, they're she's it's important when you're a princess about who you're going to marry, how those kingdoms are going to align, the interest of your kingdom, wars and or going to war, not going to war, may having an heir that will rule on as well. So these aren't small things. Marriage really, really used to be considered as a career all in itself, especially like ancient Near East. When you look at Bible days and stuff, it wasn't just I like you. It's like this is a career, and we're building civilization. So I just don't like their attitudes at all. I don't. And just go build something else. Go write something else. Go write something else. You don't have to take what's come before and twist it into all kinds of different ways. You don't have to do that. You don't have to spit on what came before you and to mock it. And it's not a bad thing to want a man to come and save you and have your life change. My mom and dad, she was hesitant to date him. He had to call a couple times. But she didn't want to really marry him because she had just apprehension of marrying a preacher, just she's just, concerned about different things. And someone ministered to her and said, well, you've been praying for God for change, for change, for change. Like this is that change. And the minister like took her hand. And this is someone that we've known for, we knew for a long while. At least this, I mean, I got to know for a while. This story takes place before I was born. But they're like, what are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? And it just helped her to kind of come to terms with like this is a risk worth taking. And then years later, actually just my last, not this past birthday I had, but the one before, we did a interview with my mom at our church, because she's very introverted, she's very quiet. She's the type of person who doesn't speak much, but when she talks you better listen. And so people wanted to know what she had to say, so we did a little Q&A. So I led it, and so I asked her, like, what was it like that had you, with such apprehension? And I don't know. I think people from the outside looking in would have just assumed it was stuff like church drama, women chasing after your husband, and how much time they have to put in the ministry, as opposed to if they might get distracted, or just different concerns like that. And she was concerned just about whether she'd be able to I guess handle the role herself as a first lady. And in my so she just had doubts within herself, which just seems so crazy to everybody, because it's like everyone just loves you. But that was a fear that she had to get over. But she was looking for that change. And before my dad started pursuing my mom, he was kind of preparing himself to be a bachelor forever. to be like Apostle Paul, just do ministry, not have a woman distract them from doing the Lord's work or whatever. And he said the Lord, was like speaking to him like, I'm about to make you happy. He's like, what do you mean, Lord? And he's like, you're not really happy, but I'm about to make you happy. And then my mom came into the picture. So a lot of don't you're Disney. Why don't you believe in true love anymore? Why don't you believe? Why don't you believe anymore? This is so crazy to me. It's so crazy to me. Magic is dead. Magic is dead in Disney, I guess. I guess that's about all I got to say on the matter. I'm just gonna look at your comments a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you guys for joining me today. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Please go to blacktnews.com, check out different content on my website, different articles, videos, etc. If you like what I do here, please consider giving a donation at blacktnews.com/donate. It costs to stream. You're like, it doesn't cost to go on YouTube. I'm streaming like on a software. Excuse me, and I'm streaming on multiple platforms. So it does cost to stream. It costs to run my website, and there's other different overheads like my email and other stuff like that I cover, and there's different equipment and other things that I'd like to get. So if you guys can support any kind of way, whether it's give $10 or $20, $50 more, God bless you. God bless you to those who've done that in the past. And I understand, though Biden is talking about Bidenomics, Bidenflation is still it's hitting people pretty hard still. So I understand if you're not able to, but I do thank you guys for commenting, for liking, for sharing, for tagging different people, for subscribing, and hitting the notification bells as well. And if you're on Facebook and you're watching, Facebook has been suppressing a lot of my posts and stuff as of late. And someone actually reached out to my sister and was like, I don't see her stuff anymore. And she's like, they're just shadow banning her. She posts all the time. So just keep in mind that I do go live at 4. If there is an issue, I might be a little late, but I'm streaming at 4 p.m. Eastern time every day, Monday through Friday. If there's like a special kind of thing, I'll announce it. If there's a issue, I will try to tweet about it or write on Facebook or make a YouTube post. If the issue is YouTube, though, like if I got a strike or something, I wouldn't be able to make a post on YouTube, so I'd have to make the post somewhere else. So if it's getting pretty late and I'm not on there's an issue. But usually, like if you want to watch 4 o'clock, if I'm on vacation or something like that, which I really haven't taken much of one, at least not like a week or something off. I usually maybe it's been like a day or 2 or something, but I haven't taken like a long one or anything like that. But I would announce that ahead of time. Like if I'm going to Comic-Con or something, I let you guys know. So if you're not seeing notifications, and I don't know how on Facebook you quite gear yourself up for notifications. On YouTube, you can subscribe and there's a notification bell and you hit the bell. I still think that they don't really show you notifications like you want, and they suggest stuff that's I'll go through my stuff and they'll show me videos from people I'm not subscribed to, and I'm like, and it's sometimes I can't even find people I'm subscribed to. So sometimes they're very strange, but you guys know that I've been pretty consistent about streaming for over a year now at this particular time. And again, if there's some kind of disruption where something has a shift or I have to cancel or whatever, like the weather was crazy last week, I did post it on Facebook and YouTube that I couldn't do it that day. So just look for me at 4 p.m. Again, I'll try not to be late. If I am late, it's a few minutes or something. If things come up, if it's 4:30 and you don't see me, something has gone awry, and there should be a post somewhere. So just want to keep that all in mind for you guys. Please check out different merchandise that I have at my store on blacktnews.com. I already mentioned earlier that I have this denounce white supremacy defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of his racism on the back. So you guys can check out that, of course. The I'm Not the Victim You're Looking For. I mentioned earlier my book that's a historical fiction fantasy. I will briefly mention. I mentioned it's like kind of like X-Men meets the American Civil War, but the, as a young woman, young child, Charlotte was purchased by a woman named Lady Cohen. And so she thought she was supposed to just like mind the house, take care of master sons, etc. But when she gets older, she realizes that she was actually selected because she has a special ability, and they sense that about her. So it's really the story about this slave who ends up, growing into her own. And it's just a really, really good story. It's one of my favorite that I've made, and it's among the most popular. I think Song on the Devil's Lips, the sequels. I think it's one of the best things that I've made or whatever, but written. But I think it's good work. You guys should check it out. Check out other books that I have. It's really easy to find me on Amazon. Not Black Teens. Just search Christina L. Barnes. It's Christina with a CH. And you should find me on Amazon. I know some of you have followed me. Some of you have checked out my stuff, and I thank you very much for it. I have 17 books that are published. I got 2 nonfiction books. The rest are fiction. Some of you have checked out Super Kid for your kids and have said that they really liked it. So I appreciate that. That's a children's chapter book. And of course, I have my abortion book. Of course, God is blatantly against abortion. And I said I would maybe mention something that was on my mind. I didn't expect to go this late. I brought that up, but what the heck? So I wrote 2 posts on YouTube about the last 2 that I wrote are about abortion, and one of them is about a story that's gone very viral. It's gone viral before, but there was a girl. She's 19 now, but at the time she committed the crime, she was 17. So she's been sentenced to 90 days in jail. And the narrative that people are pushing, like in mainstream media and some really big like left-wing folks are pushing that that she was, and politicians, not just like influencers and stuff. But they're saying like that she was arrested for an abortion. And they're like, "Oh, I thought you guys didn't want to punch the woman, and now she's being." Well, her mom has been arrested for facilitating the abortion because she got her those abortion pills. The 17-year-old, which she's 19 now, being sentenced to 90 days. By the way, just 90 days. It could be 50 with good behavior. She was sentenced for falsely reporting to the authorities, but really for burning her baby. They burned the body, and I guess when they couldn't, I don't know, fully burn it, they buried it. They claimed that she gave birth to a stillborn baby in the bathroom, and then they buried it. And when they got tipped off by somebody, the police, they started investigating, and they found the baby and had thermal wounds on the body, which means they tried to burn it. And you can't discard of remains like that, human remains like that. So the baby was 29 weeks. So that is a very viable baby. That is a baby that can feel pain. That is a baby that has consciousness. Or I don't know how deep you want to consider consciousness, but it does have consciousness. And she took the abortion pills, and that are supposed to be for earlier in her pregnancy, but that pill suffocates / starves your baby. That's what it does. So people are find it to be pretty horrific. But the narrative for the people, defending it, they're like, "Oh, look at this. This is why we, need I guess no restrictions, I guess, because they don't want anything to happen to the facilitators or the people who do it." And in the United States, they I'm not saying this is the case for every state, but they do try to focus on the person who helps obtain the abortion or performs the abortion as opposed to the actual woman. But man, it's creepy to burn your baby like that. And if you're saying, well, maybe she really needed it, she didn't. But she really wanted to fit in her jeans again. Like, when the story first came out, they were like ragging on Facebook because they were able to piece things together because they got Facebook messages or whatever. You probably shouldn't talk about your crimes on Facebook Messenger, by the way. But they got a subpoena for that. So did you be when you're chatting with folks on the internet, be careful what you write, especially if you're talking about, different crimes that you're committing. Even in a world where Roe v. Wade still existed, it would have been illegal to kill your 29-week baby, and particularly in that state, and then burn the body and just lie to the authorities and folks about what happened. So it's pretty remarkable. Even a narrative surrounding it is that, oh, well, she could have done it earlier if she had other access, which I think a lot of people are just assuming things, and making that kind of assumption to still find a positive spin on this. And they're like, yes, if women, this is why women need access to abortion, early access, and maybe because maybe they didn't have the finances and other stuff like that. So I think that's interesting, contrasting with another post, the last post that I posted. Somebody had said something like, well, abortion is just like between a woman and a doctor, it should be a private matter. And so I just point out that nobody really believes that, particularly the abortion lobby. Like a libertarian might believe that or something. An anarchist or something, but maybe some Democrats believe that. Maybe some liberals, like classic liberals or whatever, believe that. But the abortion lobby doesn't believe that it should be a private matter between a woman and her doctor, which I think that's a weird thing to say, because just because you conspire with a medical professional to take someone else's life doesn't make it a private matter and should actually make it legal, because you're consulting a doctor. Like, hey, doctor, I'd like to kill my husband. I'd like this to stay private, please. So I don't really like that kind of framing anyway, but I brought up the fact that the abortion lobby wants taxpayers to pay for it. Biden wants to appeal the Hyde Amendment. Our taxpayer dollars have purchased fresh, never frozen fetal remains for humanized mice experiments, and only God knows what else. That Planned Parenthood lobbies like different governments, like local governments, and stops governments to make like Christian organizations pay for abortions. For example, they did that out in California. There was a lawsuit and stuff from a particular church. I wrote about it in my book. I can't think of it off the top of my head though. Foothill, and some other folks like from the Foothill exhibits or whatever. So people don't want it to be private. They just don't want you to judge. That's what it is. That's what it is. So I brought that up because I think it's interesting. The people defend. Now, there's a lot of people who are pro-choice in my comments like, nah, I'm pro-choice, but that's sick. You should not be aborting a baby at 29 weeks and burning the body. Like, it's a really gruesome story. But for the people who are like, oh, we need to help them get access earlier, I think that's a little bizarre that everyone's like, it's terrible what she did to her baby. But people are like, if only we had killed it earlier. Like, I know people see it differently in 29 weeks and stuff, but think about this same baby that you think it's awful that they were killed. And if you go, but if only she had done it a few weeks earlier, and some people they feel though just a few weeks earlier would have been like 5 weeks earlier. That's really bizarre to me, but I didn't even bring that up to bring up that point. This idea that if only we help her achieve it earlier, like financially and stuff, make sure that we keep abortions cheap, that we subsidize it, that we just cover the tab. So there's always going to be this excuse of, even if someone does something horrific at 29 weeks, to be like, well, we should just covered the bill as a society or helped her get it earlier, made sure she could get it, so you wouldn't have all these complicated emotional feelings. So again, nobody wants this to be a really private matter between a woman and her doctor. And there's at least always the baby who's there too, but think about the dad. Poor dad who doesn't have a say. That's his progeny, his child. He has a right to care and to mourn and to cry and to want to save them. They just want they want this to be available. They don't want it to be something that's stigmatized. They want you to participate. They just don't want you to talk negatively about it. In some cases, they want you to shout your abortion, to be proud of that it happened. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just Google "shout your abortion." That's a real movement. And look at that Naomi. No, not Naomi. There's a comedian. She's a ginger who had a show for a little bit. She spoke at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, but she had a show for a minute, and she did a salute to abortion. You can find it probably easy if you type in "salute to abortion." I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but people say that it's they say it's healthcare. They say that it's self-care. They say that it's an act of love now. So we have really gone to banana crazy land here on this particular issue. So I just wanted to point that out, that I find it interesting. But again, if you're someone who's like, well, people should be allowed to do that, it's horrific that what she did at 29 weeks, that same baby that you're like, oh, that's awful that they burned it, the remains. It's really creepy that they did that, but I mean, it's really bad that they suffocated it, right? If you really think that it would have been somehow moral if that same child, if they had only done it like a few weeks earlier and injected it with a needle and pierced it with a needle, gave it a heart attack, or whatever the injection does, and killed the baby, you carried it for a few days, and then just rip it to pieces, I think that doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, oh yeah, someone brought up the Little Sisters of the Poor. Yeah, Little Sisters of the Poor. That was birth control, right? That wasn't was it also including the Plan B? They just didn't want to pay for any forms of birth control and stuff, which I looking into their case, I really do respect them for it. But the Hobby Lobby in particular didn't want to pay for Plan B. Actually, someone was like, when insurance pays for abortion, it only covers that for medical reasons, and I think for sexual assault maybe, and not. I don't think that's true, but I just replied and like, why did Hobby Lobby go to the Supreme Court? Because they didn't want to pay for Plan B. That's why they went there. So anyway, thank you guys for watching this super jam-packed. We did hit the 2-hour mark. Look at that. God bless you, and I will see you tomorrow.